Hello. I'm going to share my screen just to get the PowerPoint ready. Hola, buenas tardes o buenos días. Yo estoy en Chicago. Let's present here. Hello. Oh, thank you. Yeah, the background, I just had to find something that was really happy and bright because I'm excited. All right. Hello. Thank you for coming. This is my first time uh, presenting. So I have a poll that's going to go out in a little bit, just a few moments so that I can get just a little information. I will have another two more in the middle and then at the end, and the questions will be there and just, try to answer whichever option is closest to how you feel about the question. So I wanted to just explain, oh yeah, goal number one, how often do you find yourself looking for enrichment materials for multilingual learners? So I know that as an early childhood teacher, I also have two nephews. One just graduated high school, so the last 18 years, I've definitely been looking for things for him. So I can see just like some changes in terms of what authors are being presented and what stories are being presented. And so those two things mean a lot to me. And then again, how I use them in the classroom, because my students, as you can see in our picture here, we are in my neighborhood is one of the most culturally and linguistically diverse neighborhoods in Chicago in the North Side. And so this school specifically works really hard to connect bilingual education with student identities. And not all of the languages present of our multilingual learners is Spanish. But the majority, the predominant language that is not English is Spanish. So yeah, I thought about these answers, what they might be, and around almost half, like 44% is very frequently and often. So I agree, like it's I guess the second question I should have asked is how hard do you think it is? So just thinking in that, like what I look for in I guess yes, show results in a book that I use with my students. And as you can see, and it's not just literature that I'm using, but the play-based education that I was trained in for preschool in Chicago public schools is not necessarily how do I say this? It's something that it's part of a professional development, but it's not necessarily something I see in teacher preparation programs. So it's another interest in mine in terms of the professional development that we get, and just in terms of presenting some really good ideas and strategies for students in early childhood. So now I will continue. One of our projects this year that I was really looking forward to was creating flashcards, and I have my students representing 1 through 10. What's really great about what I learned from how we present numbers is that a lot of us grew up with a very specific way of counting. And when I'm working with students who come from different countries, as you'll see in this PowerPoint, there's a lot of different representations, a lot of different ways of counting, and just a lot of different ways of learning. So one thing I was trying to work towards is the base of 5 and the base of 10, and then just creating different conjuntos or add-ins. So we've got for 8, we have 4 and 4. And then, it looks like, if I'm looking at it, it kind of looks like there's something missing. And when I was putting this together, I realized, no, it's just because these two went from 5 and 1, 5 and 2, and then he switched 4 and 4, and then back we go to 5 and 4. So that was just one of the fun things that the kids discover, and that's one of the things that I think quantities it can support quantities in early learning. And my students, once they use manipulatives or other math tools or games, they can understand quantities better because of the groupings. And now, again, my background in Chicago public schools, I'm a 5th-year early childhood educator. First 4 years were in kindergarten, dual language. This year, it was more of a transitional bilingual. It was just a little different in preschool. I switched schools, and then that's why, because I was going into preschool. I was very curious to see once my year in kindergarten, my fourth year ended, I was doing a project with the Erickson Institute. And that is where I learned about the storytelling math books that I used. And I created interventions, which are just small groups, depending on the level of need. Some students would meet with me 30 minutes, 5 days a week, or some students would meet with me 20 minutes, 4 days a week. So about an hour for the groups or more, depending again, their tier. If it was tier 3, then they needed more time, more frequent intervention. If it was tier 2, I could scaffold in the beginning heavily and then slowly, take away those scaffolds. So again, a lot of what I experienced as a public school student in Chicago in high school is that the curriculum doesn't always connect with the students, and I often felt isolated or just not represented in what I was learning. And I actually didn't have a Spanish speaking teacher until I was 16 when I was put in AP Spanish, which is actually where I learned that throughout the years of English language learning, I actually kind of forgot some things about Spanish. So this whole process of teaching dual language has also been a way for me to connect back with having a teacher who does understand you and your family's language, home language. And for as far as the teaching aspect, that's again why I'm here, because I'm interested in curriculum and development, and I'm also interested in just being a resource to teachers, to families. A lot of what I was doing, I did share with families, and I shared, as much as I could. We had a lot of new things that I learned about. So when the 100th day of school was fun, then I realized, some of my students have siblings and they're already learning advanced math. So here this 6-year-old is doing, multiplication. He's not the only one actually. Last year, I had another student just on a family trip during his summer vacation doing multiplication with his family out in the restaurant. So I think whatever my students they take what I give them and they just run with it. So I think it's been really fun to do. And just to show them that playing is also educational, like that those two can connect for them. And in the middle, you can see before the interventions, their scores. This is how our standardized iReady tests there, the beginning of year, middle of year, end of year, but I chose to focus on middle and end of year because we were receiving a lot of newcomers and the school year was interrupted for everyone. So it was just a matter of deciding and prioritizing first their social emotional needs and then how math could connect all of us, because it really was our most playful time. Some of the things that we did, like I said, they have manipulatives, they created stores, like a toy store, a shoe store based on books that we were reading, and just kind of practicing what is it like to have your own say in something, what is it like to create a supply or demand, or just the experience of what they're connecting with in the readings. And my friends here, we made our own crayons, another thing that they love to do, which was awesome. We used silicone molds, so they did, Legos, dinosaurs, lots of fun, different things, gems, stars. And then we read Just a Minute by Yuyi Morales for Dia de los Muertos. I made an altar. We talked about, this was actually it was 2021, so right after COVID. So some of my students were really anxious and did lose family members to COVID, and that kind of trauma was presenting itself in the classroom, losing 3 family members right before school starts and being afraid to be in school. That was something that they definitely had to work through. But again, picture books was our connection and helped them feel safe in the classroom. And so that is where I've been continuing my work to this point with storytelling math. I had a new student come in. She was actually a 3-year-old, and I have a full day four-year-old class, 4 and 5. So for this small child who was terrified, who had to be away from her family for the whole day, whose family was going through something really hard, as a number of the students were going through it, I just said, again, prioritizing their needs, their social emotional needs, and just trying to use stories to show them that, their voices, their representation matters. And in this case, I had this beautiful classroom in my preschool room and a lot of amazing donations. So I opened up this space to be essentially a free-for-all place where it's just like an imagination station, I would call it. And we were reading the story Essie Otra Vez, and you can see this is Essie. I realized that our 3-year-old was thinking that she was Essie, and that was the first time she joined us in a read aloud. So then I kind of just took that moment, we dramatized this particular page, and she was able to play with the students and joined in by herself. They made a slide, and as you can see, her arms are up just like Essie. And then she was holding up the picture. She looked for the picture to show that what they were doing was a part of the story. They were measuring, they were building, and then again in the story, Rafael, he's trying to build a fort away from his sister, not realizing that she just wants to like knock down. So she keeps knocking things down, and he keeps trying to measure, how tall does this have to be? How many more boxes do I need to fill in this space? And again, with more overt connections to math, the hopscotch mat, it was great. I could call out a number if I needed to, and they would try to jump on the number, or they found their own way to include it in their game. And that's really what I was hoping for them, is because again, they're 4 and 5-year-olds, and they know that this child is younger than them. They know that she's scared, and they know that they can connect with her through play. So I wanted to give them the opportunity to select what they were doing, but within certain parameters. And sometimes they were literal parameters. They wanted an enclosed space, or they'd keep it open. And one of my students, this one here, he puts the clear box on the bottom to say, es una ventana para mirar afuera. So he's literally designing, this is our view from the inside and outside. And that just was one of the first in a series of these books that we use within the classroom for this student. So she came in, finally got adjusted to the class, and then the class was able to sort of take off from there. In another example, with continuing with the storytelling math series, this is Yumbo Gumbo, El Gumbo Más Delicioso, and I just presented last week with the author, Keela Dawson, and she and I were connecting on what the stories itself meant for her as an author, to include her family background and experience, but also the mathematical content. And yes, learning how to vote, I think that is number one, something that we can always be practicing and showing in terms of equity, fairness, or resolving issues, conflict resolution. These are really big things that in early childhood mean a lot and are important to establish, from the start in an education space, just because when they go to kindergarten, as I've experienced, there's going to be a mix of students, some that they've never known before, some who were in the preschool program but not in their class, and then some who've never been to school before. And so things change dramatically, I think, from preschool to kindergarten in CPS. I'm not sure about, other school districts. The only one I have worked in is Boston. And so I feel in terms of early childhood, Boston and Chicago have kind of similar things where people say, sometimes my coworkers would say, I'm going to go take a break and sit in the preschool room because it's so nice here. It's so calm. Everyone's so happy and lovey. So that's I've heard a lot from my observations and feedback that it becomes a really good environment for the kids because they have the tools to either share or figure out, what does my classmate need? What do I need? Finding common ground and finding community. So we voted on, what would they choose to eat if they were at this person's house for dinner, and Annabelle was asking them, do you want okra or do you want chicken? And so after they voted, they, pointed out they had to put their foot in whichever hula hoop. And then we got to see how many friends were in each group. And then we actually, mapped it to make sure we were collecting data. And then I could explain, oh, look what we just did. This is this is a mathematical process. We're including others, and we're using, academic content to do it. So it was really fun. And that was also imperative to the classroom structure in terms of, every teacher has a different style, but sometimes you do have to limit how many friends can be at the Lego Center or the Play-Doh Center or different areas with numbers. A lot of teachers do use that because it helps represent numbers in daily life, just like the stories in storytelling math help represent math in everyday life. And so after we read Yumbo Gumbo, I wanted to just play with them. We were about to go to winter break, and it was a really small class. So I'm assuming, some were already on winter break, but this was when we first started getting the sectionals from the Donors Choose. We had 11 students, and then about like maybe 10, so I'll say less seating than we had for students. And I just wanted to see how would they solve this problem. Would they realize, so we have the wooden chair, if you want to sit, you want some students, they didn't like sitting crisscross applesauce. They didn't like being on the floor. Or we had the sofa. Some didn't realize they could have used the sofa. They were first focusing on the sectionals, which were the first to go. Then, like I said, some were choosing the chairs, and then someone was left without a seat, or 3 friends were left without a seat. So one ended up sharing. They realized, oh, 2 can fit on here. So that's spatial awareness. 2 can sit on 1 cushion. That's we're sharing and we're recognizing quantities and space. And then kind of just like in Yumbo Gumbo, in the end, they kind of mix all of the ingredients together to make one gumbo, the super delicious gumbo. So I thought, would they connect, you can have the functionality of a chair with the comfort of a cushion. I didn't want to give it away, but I had to try to guide them towards thinking like, what is the middle ground? What would be, the best of both worlds, the mix. So then that's when they realize, oh, we can use the sofas, and then 2 more friends can sit down there because it's a love seat, or it's a 2-seater and there's a 1-seater. So they really just they just had so much fun. And then I just realized, I can keep doing this. It is really easy for me now once I see the math in every day that I can just sort of just put it out there for them to also see. And then again, around the middle of the year, as I said, we were receiving a lot of students, a lot of newcomers, and they were living in a shelter near the school. So that was a lot of the experience in the last 3 years that I was having, and just trying to be prepared emotionally for myself, but at the same time, you have a job to do. So first things first, get to know the student, get to know their interests. This student that came to us in the middle of the year, he really liked art, he really liked building. So we were reading, and I actually got this resource from Count Play Explore. It's an activity with read aloud, The Napping House, La Casa Adormecida. And it was a really fun book because the students would do kind of like the chanting, or would recall or chime in. There was like a choral response. So it was really, really engaging. And that was so much fun. One of our best read alouds. The activity asks students to build a bed that can fit 6, stacking characters, but I kind of just left it a little more open-ended. And I asked the new student, can you build a bed that fits 6 characters? So you see our friend chose some characters, and then he actually had a bed from the wooden house that we had in the classroom to just sort of reference. So that is when I realized what his interests were, and he lined up the characters in this way. And then I realized about maybe a few days before that he was using this sort of Tetris puzzle, and he was saying, this is the shelter, es el refugio. And he said, this is how we sleep. And I wasn't seeing it until he used another tool, another activity to show me this is how we sleep. So that was a lot of what he was talking to me about in the beginning. He would build houses with blocks. He would tell me all the names of the people who were in the house. He would include another student who also lived in the shelter in his house. So it just, it really is amazing what kids can connect with, and how they're processing what's going on in their lives. And I think that in terms of specific, standards and objectives, the text to self connections, the text to world connections, again, I didn't think he was going to build it in this way, but so I was really proud of the way his own original ideas and strategies came out. And he didn't give up. He was like, oh yeah, sure, yeah, I'll show you how we sleep. And it was really great for him also just to be able to talk about it. So I recommend art supplies like popsicle sticks. We used a lot of masking tape, glue bottles. You can't be afraid of mess, but you definitely want to make sure that in terms of the building, you're also helping students clean up, because it is a major process. And that also went into account with when they're using the imagination station to build something. Are you taking out all of the cones, or are you counting out and placing things or, in the end, if you take everything out, you're gonna have to be the one to put everything back. So that also does teach responsibility and just a bit more critical thinking. How much do I want to use? I don't need to squeeze the whole bottle of glue because that's going to be a big mess. And that's just on them to think through. So that internal or intrinsic motivation, that just comes from them. And again, the physical practices, early childhood has a lot of fine motor, gross motor, that in specifically preschool we are looking for. So some of our units, such as the exercise units, that is meant for us to see what is going on physically or gross motor concerns that we may have. Are they progressing? Do we need to bring OT in? These are also things that as a teacher, I may need to call in a specialist for fine motor if I see after a certain amount of time, it's more than what a pencil grip could support or accommodate. So gripping, ripping, twisting, these are all the things, kindergarten, you have to open your lunch by yourself, you have to tie your shoes. Essentially, we try to encourage a lot of that practice with what they're already doing, because it does actually strengthen the muscles in the hands. And I think also it just strengthens the resolve with children, because tying shoes is really hard. And, trying to clean up at the end of lunch and everyone's going, you're in a big crowd, you can get nervous. So giving them the time to practice that with art, I think it establishes a much more calmer environment and a much more enthusiastic environment for them. Well, let me ask if that audio came through, because I was hoping. Is the audio okay? Okay, thank you, sorry. And let me go back. So the process of the year with asylum seekers here is sometimes they would stay the whole year, sometimes they would stay a week, a month, a day. It was a really a revolving door kind of scenario. So when our Essie came, like I said, she was really timid. She would not sleep through the nap time. She was by my side always. It was really hard for both of us, because sometimes she would want me to approach her and then sometimes not. And I was just like trying everything again, thinking of my nephew who was 2 at the time. Like, okay, he's in school before he's, or he's in a situation where he is the youngest. Like, how would I approach this? So I was trying to connect with her. So during nap time, she would use the light bright. She'd stay by my side. She would start to talk more. And then I could talk to her. I could see, what is her vocabulary? What can I help her with? I wasn't gonna be, testing her, assessing her. It was really just like, what do you like? I'm your teacher. You're safe with me. You can play with your friends. You're safe with them. So throughout, yeah, like half the year, maybe 4-ish months, she spent time with us, and then she ended up transferring out. So when at the end of it, this is, you can see the result of all of our work, playing and reading, and she was participating in her own way and still learning. So this video just showcases one of the last times she was in our class. But again, as I was speaking about cleanup time, they're sorting the objects by attributes, shapes, sizes, they're practicing counting, they're modeling the self-talk in how they're building. They're telling each other the larger one over here, the smaller one under. So they're using that positional vocabulary that I do have to look for in terms of their unit or whatever objectives that we are on. And again, the critical thinking is always present, in my opinion. I'm always observing it when they're doing things daily. So again, the spatial awareness, situational awareness. 3 people can play here, a 4th comes in. What do we do? Can you tell that person, there's only 4 or there's only 3 allowed here? And then can that person accept, okay, it's not my time yet? Or do they, kind of think, oh no, you don't want me to play with you? That's an issue of, communication and understanding, which I think is a practice for everyone, regardless of age. So just having this, again, flexibility in decision making, self-control, I think that's huge for them. And now we'll see little Essie at the end of her time with us. Rápido. So as I said, the gross motor, it was indoor recess time. I know the sun is shining, but it was pretty bitterly cold as Chicago gets. And so the challenge is make it fun indoors, make it safe. Still tell them, yeah, we're not running, but you can totally jump, you can totally have fun. And she included herself and she was not shy and she was playing with everyone. So that was one of our happiest moments. And I have just a few examples of uh, the other ways that we were using our tools in class. So one of my students, well, I have a pretty funny story about this student, but with the exercise unit, I think that's really when the students were getting into patterns. And so I would challenge them, can you make a pattern? So my friend, I was still trying to figure out his pattern. Maybe there wasn't a pattern, but again, that's what I was using this activity for. So we have a large space. So I got to show them like, what does it look like when you're stretching, a really long distance or a short distance. So I got to use that. And I was using their own pictures to be able to have the students not feel like, you're calling them out the cold call, but more like, hey, what were you doing when you were doing this? Because when I do this with them, when I speak to them that way, they're just like, oh, I was just, they're opening up rather than, who can tell me the or what distance has more? It's hard to do that with 3, 4, and 5 year olds. But when you open the conversation up to just something pretty casual, like a picture chat in the beginning of the class, then I think that they keep that information on their mind when they go and play, because sometimes they would just go recreate what that was, or they would do it differently. They'd say, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to use stars and squares, or squares and circles. So it already got them thinking about what they were doing just because someone else was doing it. Kind of, the not peer pressure, but it's the reflection of, well, I want to do that because they're doing it and I want the teacher to talk about me. So it was a lot of, playing into how students want to be validated, but at the same time helping them validate each other. And then sometimes I would just find really fun things that I think, hey, would that work in the classroom? So sometimes they were, like my testing, my control group or my test group. So I found these inflatable dice and I wanted to see where were we at in terms of base 10. And if they could figure out that one person couldn't represent 6 and 5 with just 2 hands. You could represent 10 with 2 hands, but you can't hold, or sorry, 4 and 6. Like I said that, yeah. So you can't do 4 and then you can't pull up 6. You need another hand. So that was the challenge. And it was interesting to see. Definitely the older students were kind of picking at the idea a little more, as you can see here. But then with the representations, they would get confused because they would want to put 4 and 1, and then, so it was just an interesting thing to see, again, just testing out, like, can we do this? Trying to get them thinking a little more abstractly than just the general, here's a number, how can you tell me how many there are? And I think that's why I focus on things that don't necessarily have the numeral represented, like the hopscotch is fine, but I also want to include, different visuals, like the dots are really great, and there are also picture books with dots. 10 perfect dots, I think it is. It's really great. It's a good one. And then again, we have Unifix cubes, and I think they were building ants. Not sure, but I was really excited to see. I'm looking at their actual design, because you have to, in order for this to be stable, your sides have to be even, and you have to know what even is, and you also have to know how many you're using on each side. And so that was really fun for them to see. As you can see, this one, he kept going, kept extending the legs. So it was, again, one way for them to just have an open-ended tool, an open-ended resource, but for me to also see quantities and spatial awareness and critical thinking, and then also just dramatic play. Can you engage in do I need to be here, or are you okay without me? And I think they were all fine without me, but of course, they want to say, look, Miss Arroyo, mira, Miss Arroyo, mira, maestra. So I'm there, but they're not, they don't need me to be there, and if that makes sense, which is again the goal. You want them to just have sort of the autonomy to decide for themselves what they're going to do, recognize, yeah, I'm going to play safe, I'm gonna be fair. Those are huge things in preschool. And then my friend here, so she loved soccer and I loved playing soccer with her. And she used the cubes to make a goal. And then she made me think of the difference in trophies between Messi and Ronaldo. Because again, some of my students would come with a Cristiano Ronaldo blanket at nap time. So I would also try to talk to them about their interests outside of school because it would always shock them that I knew what Super Mario is or Sonic. But it also was my way of sort of representing that in the classroom, like their interests are my interests too. In general, I do like video games and I do like, the sort of general things of, play-based education. So it's fun for them too. And so I asked them if they knew how many trophies Messi had, how many trophies, the Ballon d'Or, which is one of the highest trophies you can win as a player in soccer, who had more and how could we compare the two and what is more. So I explained to them that Ronaldo had 5 and Messi had 8. So we would try to represent this is 5, this is 8. If I go back to the 5, who has more is you would think the answer would be, oh, 8 because it's 3 more. There's 5 and 3, and then this is just the 5. You're missing the 3. So I'd ask them, so who has more goals? Every time they'd say Ronaldo. So I think there's no accounting for math when it comes to hardcore Ronaldo fans. But it was really funny. It was really, a way again, just to connect with them, just to be silly with them. But again, those Ronaldo fans are hardcore.
Uno, dos, tres.
So this was our trap, or one of the traps in How to Catch a Leprechaun after we read it. They are fascinated by the How to Catch series by Adam Wallace, and I like them too because they're pretty, they're fictional, they're kind of in the fantasy. Sometimes they talk about, they love unicorns, and there's the How to Catch a Unicorn book. So they're just like, this is my reference book. I'm gonna catch a unicorn. So what the actual content for me was the STEM part of building a leprechaun trap. And so they were asking about the box trap and what was that, and they had never seen one before. So I explained to them sometimes they're called rabbit traps, and this is why. I gave them some tools, and they all got together. They all used a foam brick to represent the box. Some of them wanted to actually test it out with a figure, like would the box land on the leprechaun? Would he be trapped? They were going so far in their educated guesses and their hypotheses. And then in their designs, again, they all just sort of a little nervous, but tried more or less the same thing. And then yeah, so they got to pull the string, they got to figure out, again, that vocabulary of angled and gravity, and so I think that they enjoyed it. I definitely think that their classmates were seeing this style of trap, but then some chose, like I said, the other materials that we would always have in the art station.
Pero me creas un papel. Era para una copa de bebé.
So these are my students when I brought out the water table because it took too long to get warm outside. Finally, we had a nice hot day and I had some foam paint from Lakeshore, and that's one of my favorite companies for educational resources. So I used a bit of different colors. I think this one was green and blue. We picked paleta colors, which lime is green, blue is chicle, and so this was their first time using the water table. This was their first time using the measuring cups, the measuring spoons. And again, I wanted to keep it open-ended. I only had 3 smocks, but I don't think the 4th one cared to get wet because again, it was really hot. So I got to just let them have like a splash day, which is always really fun for the kids. And these photos are after the moment I asked them, are you having fun? And you can see, their complete explosion of yeah, which is always a good sign. What this student was saying first, he was telling me it was a coffee for me. So I said, thank you. I wasn't gonna drink that. And then he also said it was a soup for a baby. And on the other side, the girls are saying, oh no, don't put the foam in, just get the water. So again, open-ended, interesting to see them interact with it. Obviously, they knew what it was for. One of the students, was thinking cooking when he was seeing these, which is great because with this student, the one who was talking about the food, he actually had said something earlier in the year. He didn't want to play in the play kitchen because the kitchen was for girls. And so, at the end of the day, I'm trying to think of a good response. So I just tell him, because I always hear him talking about McDonald's, hey, you like McDonald's, right? And he's like, yeah. And I tell him, well, that restaurant was started by a man, right? And he's like, McDonald's? And then from that moment on, he went on to play in the restaurant. He's like, I'm going to make a great restaurant and so he would constantly take my order and then he would bring me, the play food. So once I subverted that sort of thinking, he was just way more interested in just the play aspect, not the kitchen is a gendered space. And so again, another reason why I wanted to pull these things out is because to me, I think science when I think of measuring cups and spoons, not necessarily cooking, but guess what? Cooking and science are connected. And so, maybe this helped at home. I don't know, but it was one of my ways that, my mom would always include us in the kitchen because one, she is a scientist, but two, she would make our own salt dough. So it's not something I got to do this year, but salt dough is really easy. I believe it's just flour, salt, and water, and it's essentially Play-Doh. So she would dye it, and I'd always remember it'd be really warm because she had to use boiling water, and we had to let it cool for some time. But to me, that's the connection I have with either like cooking and science is because of my mom. So this is another activity from Count Play Explore. The butterfly prints, I think this one was a major hit with the kids because they would constantly want to do this project. Because it does require, paint, paper, time to dry. I had to try to plan it throughout the year. And to make it really special, we started first with Valentine's love bugs. And I only had red, blue, and yellow because throughout the year, they're painting at the painting station. What was left were primary colors. So I love Piet Mondrian. In kindergarten, I was able to do a Piet Mondrian activity. That was not going to be the case in kindergarten, so I wanted to make it again more open-ended, more just play-based. Mess is fine, I love mixing colors, and I wanted to teach them that you can do that. So they actually cut out the heart. So they folded the piece of paper, kind of did like the half heart, had to fold and cut, another process that, yes, it took time, but they wanted to do a really good job. So they purposefully and intentionally took their time. And then when I was doing the demonstrations, they were actually counting down, and we hadn't done any countdowns before. Not to say that, I wasn't teaching them, but we weren't counting backwards. Somebody just started 3, 2, 1. So every time I would mix, first red and yellow, then red and blue, then blue and yellow, and then, they'll all keep counting down, and they wanted to take these home immediately. I wanted to, put them up because they were so nice. I wanted to put them up outside, but this was something that they were like, no, I want to take it now. Let me take it now. So I was like, let me just hang it for a week, then you can take it. And yeah, so you could see that they were tracing the shapes. And I just appreciate that it's an original, it's original to them. It's unique. Each one was unique. And again, oh yeah, here's my second poll. Would you describe yourself as someone who can connect math to everyday scenarios? Very interesting. I agree. I feel like without the training, I was definitely someone who, I had taken a course before in my master's for my teaching degree at Boston College. It was a teaching math and technology course. Incidentally, helped me out because it was 2020 when I was getting my master's degree and when I started teaching. So if I hadn't had that training, I don't think I would have known as much as I did when I was teaching through the pandemic, which is one thing that I think I wished could have been different for the kids, obviously, but asynchronous learning and art and math is something that it's there, it's just not developed. And yeah. I'm gonna stop the poll for now. I think a majority of us think that like, yeah, this is something accessible. I guess that would be the other way of asking this. Do you think this could be accessible? I didn't share. This is definitely the appeal to me of art and math, or just play-based education in math, literature and math. I think it is there, but you just need the experiences to connect it. Something that I'm providing for my students, and with practice, something I can present to more teachers as in a different platform, such as this one. And then the second time we did this, it wasn't a butterfly print, it was a Mother's Day card. And I want to highlight these two books that about a few years ago, I was looking into. I don't even know how I got into these books, but I was reading it and it kind of changed my mind about a lot of things that have to do with art. And so this is the Afro-Cobra movement, art movement. And so in this book, I learned that some of the founding members were questioning why a white canvas was the standard, or what some would call the canon to art, that all art was painted on a white canvas. And so what would happen if you painted on a black canvas? And that is something that I incorporated into the classroom. So what would happen with this mixing color project with a black canvas? And my TA, actually, my teaching assistant, she told me she didn't expect the colors to come out as vibrant. And so I think that without having read these stories or this art history, I wouldn't have known. I also wouldn't have been recognized like the importance of doing that in the classroom, because I don't know, again, how long would it have been before someone told them, hey, use a black background. So just to get them to think outside of certain, I don't know, historical types of thinking, or just kind of antiquated, think only white paper. No, let's try something different and see what happens. And then, like I said, so that would be a branching out of the typical professional development that I would see in the year. It is focused heavily on data and testing. And I think that is a lot to ask of our students in early childhood, is to be, assessed constantly and so much. But that is why, sometimes in kindergarten, I would say, yes, you work hard, but we can play harder. So even in kindergarten, I would try to bring time for art, for play, whatever I could. And so this is, another way we were exploring math with visual arts. And I think that I loved it too, because these came out more like Rorschach. So I would tell them, this one looks like the coral reef to me. This one looks like a brain scan to me. This one also looks like a brain scan. This one looks like a coquille. Like I can see, this looks like the frog's body and the legs. So this was their Mother's Day card. And then they wrote on the inside. And then you can see right here, again, moment my teaching assistant caught when he opened his art project to see. He was like, oh, wow, and that's again what I'm looking for. Like, do you enjoy this? Are you having fun? Did you learn something new? Same here. They were just looking at each other's artwork and just feeling proud.
Así, así. ¿Ya? Wow. ¿Te sució?
So this blew my mind because, again, those two projects with the butterfly prints were exploring symmetry. And then this was the first time I'd noticed that he was doing this, ambidextrously. And he's not the only one. A week after this, another student took two pieces of chalk and made a heart by, again, doing two hands at once. And so I was really proud of them. They were exploring, they were trying new things. This came out looking really cool, in my opinion. And again, we're trying to spend more time outside. Classroom can get hot. Sometimes it's just better to be outside as much as possible, because they're already at the end of the year. They're revving to go. They're done. So some of them were doing this, others were just depicting their homes, their plans for summer, how many people are living in their homes, how many units are in the building, exactly what is, their layout. So chalk is also another amazing tool for them. What I wish I recorded was that sometimes we would wet the ground, and then the chalk would come out darker, more of like a paint texture because the chalk would sort of melt into the water. And they were also really excited because the colors would come out darker, or they could kind of just like hand paint on the floor. So yes, it was messy, but again, I always had the water station to clean up. And I think that's the point of being outside. And I think this art exploration also helped because I would include the iPad sometimes, just for progress monitoring. I used Happy Numbers, which is free to teachers. And it was another game-based math activity. They did like it, but it was like, it wasn't that they were like begging for the iPad. They all were just like, yeah, I'm gonna go play, I'm gonna do art, I want to paint. The iPad was actually pretty low on the list, which I think is a challenge for a lot of people because my co-teachers were saying, oh, they just want to be on the iPad. And so that is something that I noticed that was different in my classroom.
Verde.
Y si mezclo acá, ¿qué pasa?
Rosado.
¿Qué color se hizo?
Naranja. Celeste. Esa rosa, celeste.
Era azul. ¿Qué color se hizo ahora?
Azul. Verde.
Verde. ¿Y acá?
Rosa. Imagine my water bottle. Wow.
So this was one of the moments, again, end of year. Our grade level, throughout the year, we didn't have access to our classroom for our preparation period. So we would always brainstorm, okay, how do we get them to get extra, gross motor play, extra play while we get to have time in the classroom. So that got to work out towards the end of the year. But one thing I was also focusing on was my teaching assistant. She was going through a teacher preparation program, and I felt like there needed to be more practice with content and instruction than what the program was giving her. So I would try to give her instructions and just try to give her activities without me explaining it so that she could also learn from the experience of just doing something with the kids. And so this one was mixing colors, but with the water. So first we mixed colors with the paint. Now we're using that foam paint water mixture. It was the 3 primary colors: blue, yellow, and then in the bottle was yellow, or no, I just meant, it was blue and red, in the bottle was yellow. So as she's pouring it and mixing it, they are witnessing the colors changing and then trying to describe it and trying to figure out what color is it going to be. And I know it's a little off on camera, but in person, it was actually green and orange. And again, just presenting information in a different way. So yes, you've mixed colors, but we didn't use it in liquid form. We used it in a little more, paint is liquid, but water-based. So again, things that could be accessible at home. What would they do if they had these ideas of mixing colors at home? If they have food coloring, could they spend some time to just mix colors? And I actually had, it was a Halloween decoration. It was like these tubes, like test tubes. Those are also fun. They're just plastic. They have caps. I found them at Target, again, during the Halloween decoration time, but I used them with little droppers. Okay, what's happening next? And I think those ideas, those are tools that could help them practice, as well as with the spoons, using a spoon to scoop. And again, when do we use spoons in real life? And yes, you are practicing scooping because regularly we should be using utensils, because they're everywhere. Their hands, not always washed, but there's a point to all of this, which is just using everyday tools and experiences to just learn and play. And finally, there's one more poll that'll come up, but this information, these resources are all linked and they are accessible to attendees as well. I will be providing the flashcards. So you saw the pictures in the beginning with the representations 1 through 10 with the hands. So you'll get a PDF of flashcards for you to print. If you print one and you have a younger student, you could just do flash math. So you hold up a number. If they're about, I would say 6 or older, you can count to 3 and then hide it. If it's like a first, 4 or 5-year-old, you need to hold it up and then you build into playing, you know, okay, flash, oh, I'm just gonna flash it and then hide it. How many do I have? There's a lot of different ways to use the flashcards. You can also just be, you print out 2 sets, and then you play Go Fish, or you play more or less Más o Menos, where you mix up, you shuffle your cards, you flip it over, whoever has the higher number wins both cards. And then if there's a tie, what do? You add on, so then there's 2 hands and you're, you know, building numbers. So these flashcards are intended to be used, I would say, from preschool to 1st grade, depending again on the mathematical content that needs help. And my project summary that I did with the interventions, which explains the books that I use, the timing, you know, the actual research process, it's at bibliomath.org. I also have, you know, videos and evidence and artifacts of the students from my kindergarten class as we were going through the kindergarten standards of math and, you know, the math content in that year. And I also wanted to highlight Charles Bridge. That is also has free printables. So just like the Count Play Explore butterfly instructions, the butterfly print, there are resources. If you read the books, I am going to have my math content published in their newest book. I believe it will be fall of 2025. The book is called Cesar Cerulean Surprise, and yeah, I contributed the math activities, which are always included in the back of the book. So my contribution will come out this fall, hopefully. And oh, right, another one that I love, just because I personally have been, you know, working with the curriculum developers, greatfirst8.org. It's for the first 8 years, so early childhood to 2nd grade. That one particularly wants to promote culturally relevant pedagogy and learning and using student experiences like international Latinx experiences, Afro-Latina experiences. The work in that curriculum is really interesting too, and really exciting and really playful and joyful. So I hope that these resources are useful to you, or you can share them out with anyone interested. But these are some of the things that I've been working on, and that's what's been helping me throughout the years. There's our 3rd question. How do you like to consume new information? If you could just choose one. I am definitely a paper and pencil person. In print, I like to write on my things. Sometimes I tried to use a mix of this when I was a writing tutor for college here. I had adult learners, so that was also an interesting experience. And I liked it. I definitely missed tutoring writing. Awesome. And then I'm just gonna look at the chat. I will stop sharing. Unless, is there a slide anyone wants me to go back to? Great. Oh, wait, okay. Ooh, okay. I got a request for the multicultural read aloud chapter book style. Okay, let me think. That one, I mean, I know right now my kids are really, and I don't blame them because I think at this age I was also reading Captain Underpants. But my kindergarten student last year, one of them, he managed to end the year reading chapter books, and his parent asked me, you know, or thanked me because that is something that she wanted to have established. I don't know, just type answer. Gosh, the 1st graders, let's see. Well, I mean, I love Junie B. Jones, but they're not necessarily in Spanish, but that is a really good question. And Casey, Can we check on the PDF for the flashcards, the pre-K math project? We're having one download issue. I know that there was earlier something with the uploads, but I don't know if I put my email in. Oh, I can't hear you, Casey. I'm sorry.
Technical difficulties. Hi, yes. So all the resources are in the resource button. They have been updated as well as the flashcards are in there as well. And then there was one Q&A about, oh yeah, the chapter books, which you did. So thank you so much.
I'm just responding in the Q&A. So we have about 3 minutes. And I trying to I know definitely for the chapter books, I have seen, I look at my public library website because the staff usually does put really good picks. And they do, for us, they have things, sorted in different sections. So kind of like what a bookstore would do, but I like using the public library database. But I will definitely try to get a list to you for the chapter books. And again, feel free to share, any of the flashcards if you end up successfully downloading them. They're free to send to whoever you think would want to use them. Slide to, oh, okay. Let me go to the slide. Sorry, was this, I just hope this is the slide that you were looking for. I appreciate the comments, thank you. I'm trying to read all of them. Oh, yes, the slides do get shared to the attendees. Hello, Natalie and CPS. Yeah, the regional dialects that were represented in our school year this year. I learned so many new ways of saying backpack, jacket, shoes, even straw, popote, sorbete. There's a lot of different things that I am trying to promote within our Spanish language arts program. I have already spoken directly, to CPS, early childhood offices of multilingual, multicultural learning. I've recommended directly to the Spanish language arts coordinators. These are things that I think should be incorporated in what the kids are learning. Thank you, Gloria. Oh, great. I just saw from Angelica, there is a family read aloud list and different grades reading lists through the children's page. Let me send that to. Yes, Aida. How do I have your hand raised? Casey, is Aida able to unmute? Because I saw that her hand was raised. Thank you all. Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss it. All right. So, oh, yeah, that's time. I will end the Yeah, a majority of people said print, so I agree. I will definitely work on making printables. And I will end the session for attendees. Thank you so much. I look forward to hopefully doing this again in the future. Thank you.